I did not think Starfield was going to be a good game. Ever since its release back in late 2023, it's been an unbelievably divisive title. With it coming from Bethesda and it being its first major release since Fallout 4, people were expecting the world.
Hey guys, what about me?
Like I said, first major release since Fallout 4. Fans were ready to see what new ways Bethesda were going to push boundaries. This was a brand new IP for them, moving away from Elder Scrolls and Fallout. This was being slayed as the ultimate space adventure. And then it released. Yeah, players did not like this game. Don't ask me how I know that, it's just a hunch. I was planning on playing it soon after it was released because I'm a major Bethesda fan. I've played almost every RPG they've made. From Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout 3 and 4. But from the reception, I put it off. And well, 2.5 years later, I finally got around to it. And I was going into Starfield not expecting much. I honestly didn't think I would really enjoy it, but I was proven wrong. I really had a fun time with Starfield. Now, this isn't some amazing title. There are way too many flaws and issues I have with it for me to claim that. But there is so much content here that is outright amazing and some of the better stuff Bethesda has ever put out. Unfortunately, a lot of that good stuff though comes a lot later in the game. So let's start from the beginning and boot up Starfield for the first time and see how it surpassed my expectations. The opening few hours, you could maybe even say the first 10ish hours of this game are not good. We're getting Starfield's biggest issue out of the way from the get-go, and that is the fact that it does absolutely nothing to pull you in as a player during its opening and early game. In the opening sequence of this title, we find ourselves at this mining outpost during one of our first days there, and we are doing this job collecting something. And through this mission, we uncover a mysterious artifact, and once we touch said artifact, we see these visions of space. We pass out from the interaction and wake up later on. Here we get to create our character, and from there we go and meet Barrett, who works for a group called Constellation. It was the one who made us get the artifact. We then get attacked by pirates who are after Barrett. And it's average Bethesda game where your character could have zero combat background, yet sweeps the floor with these guys. Following the fight, we are given Barrett's ship because he says we've changed since touching the artifact and that we must bring it to Constellation where he works. He stays behind in case more pirates arrive, and that's the gist of the opening sequence of this game. It's typical Bethesda fashion in many ways, where you go from generic person to having this grand mission in the span of half an hour, and you jump through many hoops to get there. I don't really have an issue with that part. I played Oblivion and had Uriel Septim say to me he saw me in a dream and that I'm special. But my issue is that it's just an underwhelming opening. Not a single thing about these first 30 minutes piqued my interest or made me excited to see where the story was gonna go. I don't need some jaw-dropping starring segment, but Bethesda openings usually hook me and establish this really interesting premise. Fallout 3 with escaping the vault, Fallout 4 with the nuke explosion, Oblivion with the king dying, and Skyrim escaping your death sentence during a dragon attack. All of these very quickly establish and set up a storyline, or simply a sick opening 30 minutes. Now, on the flip side, some people come at it from the angle stating that these openings create too much of an urgent task, where exploring the open world causes dissonance. I can agree with that. Where Fallout 4 you have this critical goal to find your son, and I would be doing straight nonsense for hours. I see the issue there. And Starfield succeeds in doing that in their opening, where they don't put this looming doom or task on the player from the jump. The issue is that exploration is not the same in this game. Morrowind follows a similar trend and has easily the tamest opening out of any Bethesda game. But their open world is so amazing, and the loose start of the story allows the player to start exploring it. The game straight up encourages you to do so early on by telling you to just go level up and explore and then come back later. Oh, that game is so good. Please play Morrowind if you haven't. It is still Bethesda's best game. Starfield, on the other hand, has exploration that doesn't match up with its predecessors. When you finish an opening in any Bethesda game, you are met with a very similar situation. Think for 1 second what they all have in common. That is the exit from the opening sequence into taking in the open world around you. There you are standing, looking upon this brand new world, ready to take everything in and discover all the secrets it has to offer. Everywhere you look, you have different points of interest you can go towards and explore. Those games work so hard to draw your attention to all these different areas. You can ignore the main mission entirely and discover so much, which is the typical route I go down when starting a Bethesda game. I ignore that main story for hours upon hours, just immersing myself into the world around me. Starfield, on the other hand, you fast travel into space, and there's no flying and landing on the planet, so you fast travel to whatever planet you want to explore. There is not that moment of wonder and excitement from Starfield's opening. The feeling I had walking out of that vault in Fallout 3 is one of my favorite gaming moments in history. Here, you don't step onto a planet or fly into space and get blown away from the possibilities. You just go through loading screens picking which planet you want to go to, and it's a high likelihood that the planet will not be worth your time. I landed on random planets just to be on barren landscapes with 1 or 2 points of interest. So you might as well just go straight to New Atlantis, where the main story wants you to go, so you can actually find worthwhile content. That's what I did after the opening. The first place I landed was New Atlantis. I can get past a somewhat boring or generic 30 minutes at the start of a game. If the game is encouraging exploration and doesn't want the main story to feel too daunting or urgent from the jump, I'm down with that. But the issue arises when you offer poor exploration after it, or a main story that takes many missions to get good. Because Starfield's exploration is truly its biggest flaw. If you go into Starfield expecting to be able to play it the same way you have other Bethesda titles, you will hate your time with it, because the game doesn't play that way. Especially for players who are unsure about playing Starfield, I truly believe nothing happens for a good portion to convince the player this is worth their time. From a boring opening to a lackluster open world, you're really asking a lot from the player to commit to this title. Because landing on a random planet then exploring it offers very little reward. Besides some resources or a few low points of interest, there's nothing there. You can't just place a map marker in a random corner and walk there to see what you find along the way. There is no roaming about. You are stuck going through loading screen after loading screen. I'm just rehashing complaints everyone has had since the start. I don't like it at all. My best advice is to ignore it completely. To get the best out of Starfield, I found just focusing on the factions, some miscellaneous quests, and the main story will result in a much more enjoyable time with the game. There's absolutely no need for you to explore the hundreds of useless planets. If you just stay focused on the main cities and quests, I really think you'll have a good time with this game. It's how I played from the jump, and I believe was the main contributor to me enjoying this title. And you will still get a good 60 hours minimum out of it. Exploration, which was the key aspect and probably the best feature to all other Bethesda games, just isn't the case here. And it's why I believe many people grew to not like their time with the game. They went in expecting a normal Bethesda open world experience, and instead got the opposite, where staying quest focused is the best way to play it. But that doesn't mean the game is suddenly bad, which I see as the jump many people make. Of course, people have their own opinions, and I completely agree. I would rather the exploration in those other games compared to what we got in Starfield. But once you get past the poor exploration, there is a lot of great stuff here. It just unfortunately takes some time to get to. Everything amazing in Starfield comes in the mid to late game. So as I made more progress through this title, I found myself enjoying it more and more. Things were slow at the start with going through New Atlantis and not really finding much good side content there. I helped some UC security officer retrieve a package, I helped some dude with trees, interviewed people, delivered art. All fairly generic and fetchy missions which weren't great. But foundations were laid and it helped me immerse myself a bit into the city. I got access to some factions like the Vanguard and Ryujin, I met up with members of Constellation for the main story, and I started finding better gear, weapons, and was leveling up my character. I was getting into the loop of Starfield, and that was one of the aspects I fairly enjoyed. Even though it heavily differs from previous Bethesda games, it had that same factor of once you were in a flow, you could play for hours, and it was really fun to play. But early on during this settling in, there were some features that I was getting annoyed by. One of them was being unable to read the description of an item before picking it up. It's something I noticed on the first mission in the main story going after the pirate ship. I would have to click to go into transfer mode just to see what it does. Every other Bethesda game, you could just read the item description right there. Wait, for real? All of them were like this? Since when? I'm actually stupid. I was grabbing footage for this section and then I realized every other Bethesda game does this process the same way that Starfield does, so ignore my point. But one feature I did have a good time with from the start to the end was the lockpicking minigame. That was a lot of fun. But as I made my way through the solar systems and got a good 10 to 20 hours into the title, one of the stronger aspects for me was the combat. Now, typically for me, gameplay is not something I care about much in a Bethesda title. This is the combat that I would deal with and still think the game is great. It doesn't get much better than this. But the combat in Starfield surprised me in how much I enjoyed it, which is dumb to think because I love Fallout 4's. We've seen over time Bethesda improve their gunplay through the Fallout games, from Fallout 3's fairly poor gameplay to Fallout 4 having great variety in weapons, the feel of the attacks, verticality in locations, customization. And we continue to see some of that improvement here, but also a few drawbacks. The variety in weapons in Starfield is 100% there, having ballistic weapons, laser types, particle beams, shotguns, and there being variety within those categories themselves. The gunplay feels very smooth and fluid. The movement is fantastic with having the jetpack to traverse around during fights. I enjoyed every encounter I got into, especially fights with no gravity. The recoil in those sections creates such an interactive area to fight in. I honestly wish there were more sections like it. So in terms of the feel of using the guns and the variety they offer, it's probably the best Bethesda has ever done. But sometimes enemies can be a bit damage spongy, and I do think there are areas they've regressed compared to Fallout 4. Firstly, the enemy variety in this game is just outright bad, with all of them just being humans with guns, and not even really offering different variety within that. You get to fight robots sometimes, but they're boring to fight, and terramorphs occasionally, but they're not prevalent enough. Compared to Fallout 4, it's not even a competition. You have super mutants, raiders, ghouls, synths, deathclaws, and there's so many more. Just from those few I listed, there's more variety. And with that variety, encounters go differently because different enemies attack in unique ways. I also think there was more punch to the guns in Fallout 4 and more of a use for melee weapons. And lastly, Fallout 4 had better level design for encounters, especially within Boston. The verticality that is offered is amazing, and that's not really there within Starfield, with encounters being in open spaces outside of camps with some basic cover, or inside bases where the height isn't really there. There are some locations that offer more of that though, and utilizing the jetpack during those types of fights create really enjoyable sequences. As a whole, the combat was great and improved in some manners. I just feel like it regressed in some ways as well. But this is a game in space, so the combat doesn't end with it just being on the ground. We also have space combat with your ship. This is one of those situations where if there was more space travel, there would have been more encounters. But with the constant need to use fast travel, I rarely engaged with it. But the times that I did, they were solid. I found movement with the ship to work well, being able to strafe to avoid damage and to keep track with enemy ships. And the actual fighting was pretty basic, I guess, with just having some missiles or lasers, but it felt good. I personally think if it leaned a little bit more into a system like Black Flag, it could have worked a lot better. But I think to implement a ship combat like that, the issues go a lot deeper than just the combat. The docking isn't the greatest in Starfield and isn't a fluid thing. Again, with loading screens, it slows down that experience slightly. And it requires upgrades that you simply might not engage with, since ship traveling isn't really a needed thing in this game. And prior to the update, something that you simply couldn't do. At least now with the Freelance update, space travel is a lot more viable. And I was in the late game when it came out, and it was a good update. I just don't know if it warrants ship travel to be the main thing now. I still find fast traveling to be more worth your time, even though unique encounters are a lot more prevalent. On the flip side though, Black Flag shined in traversing with the Jackdaw, the sea shanties, docking and taking out other ships, randomly landing on islands. That level of exploration isn't possible in Starfield, which hurts its combat. Even though the combat honestly isn't that bad, I just wish it had more of a need besides a few missions. The ship customization is so vast and something I wanted to get into, but I never found it worthwhile to engage with. Unlike a Black Flag where naval combat is so integral. As a whole, the ship combat mechanics are not bad at all. Besides a more fluid docking system, I have no actual complaints. I just need it to be a bigger part of the gameplay loop. But leaving the combat aside now, in terms of upgrading weapons, I had a great time with it. The modding of your different guns adds an extra layer of personality to your weapons and they feel even more like your own. And the new recent update improves on it even more so, with being able to upgrade weapons the whole game to keep them viable, especially if you enjoy the gun or have invested mods into it. Staying on the topic of upgrading, another aspect I was heavily engaged with in the mid-game were skills in leveling up my character, which I guess is just common sense for an RPG. But it's very important in Starfield, and an area I have mixed feelings on. It's definitely not bad, and there are a lot of aspects I like about it. But in terms of execution, it fell short. Whenever you level up, you are given a skill point to invest into skills. You have 5 different skill trees, all having 4 tiers within each one. To reach these higher tiers, you need to spend enough points in that skill tree. And to be able to level up abilities, there are requirements you must meet first. I enjoy all those ideas. Having to use said skill to be allowed to upgrade is something I prefer to see in games. Even if I'm forced to do ship combat simulation so I can use a better ship, or spam grav jump so I can go farther distances. It's why I love Elder Scrolls, because to level up specific skills, you have to use them. Even though Starfield differs from other Bethesda titles as it doesn't have attributes or direct skills. In some ways they do like affinities with different guns, but it doesn't have specific stuff like speech, medicine, repair in games like Fallout 3. Or attributes like strength, luck, intelligence from Morrowind or Oblivion. The place where the skills become a bit more annoying is how almost every single thing imaginable is tied behind them. And it takes a lot of time to invest in these abilities and rank them up. It's a double-edged sword. I like the effort that is needed to get certain skills, and how it has to be a part of your playstyle to upgrade it comfortably. But when I get a bigger ship and spend all this time doing so, then realizing I can't even have a full crew because that's another skill I need to upgrade, it all becomes a bit tedious. Like, I really enjoyed upgrading my weapons, but I was never able to fully dive into it because there were a lot of abilities that stopped me from doing so. The commitment was just a bit too high for me to engage with some of these other features. It's like this because the skills are very much built for New Game Plus, as you keep them and continue upgrading your character and following playthroughs. It's somewhat an issue that bleeds into the whole game for me, but Bethesda built a lot of this experience for New Game Plus. So you miss out on a lot of fun things unless you put hundreds of hours into it. Also, Starfield doesn't really teach you anything, so I felt I learned about a useful skill too late to actually use it. I am all for not handholding, I prefer that in video games, but you can easily play this whole game and not engage with heavy amounts of features of this title. I never built an outpost, I barely played around with upgrading my ship, and these are features that are just not shown to the player really. And resource gathering is so needed for this, but they decide to make over-encumberment more common than loading screens in this game, which is an accomplishment in of itself. Resources are so integral, but you over-encumber easily, so you can never pick that much up at once while you're out on a mission. It's dumb in my opinion that you make these features so tedious to engage with. It feels like a chore a lot of the time instead of a fun gameplay loop. And to get around this, you have to seriously spend time building outposts and creating some storage systems to transfer items around. But as a whole, I found the combat and upgrading to be really enjoyable and one of the stronger portions of the game. But some other aspects of the gameplay just weren't fun to engage with. Throughout all this time getting accustomed to the gameplay and playing around with all the mechanics, I started to get into a lot of the quest lines that this game has to offer. And there's a bunch here. That's what took up most of my time in this title. In most Bethesda games, they have things like guilds or different groups that have these quest lines. And the same goes here for Starfield. There are 4 main groups that you can join. These are the Vanguard, Freestar Collective, Ryujin, and the Crimson Fleet. And for me, this is hands down the best part of the entire game. Starfield has a lot of iffy aspects, but underneath its issues, there are some amazing elements, and the factions are one of them. There's quests here that are some of the best that Bethesda has ever made. The Vanguard was the first faction that I really sunk my teeth into and completed. This is the only faction that you can join directly in New Atlantis, so I joined fairly early on, but completing the faction carried maybe until halfway through the game. The UC Vanguard is the civilian fleet and a branch of the UC Navy. The main premise behind this faction is stopping a terramorph threat that spans across the settled systems, and within that, uncovering all the conspiracies within the military and different groups from the Colony War, which is much needed. As being a new IP for Bethesda, it needs a lot of build-up to even sniff the depth of lore that Fallout and Elder Scrolls have. And this is really one of the only quest lines that expands on it. This was easily one of the strongest sections in the game, and it's potentially the best. And not just the premise, but some of the quests were so unique for Bethesda. From the Terramorphs attacking New Atlantis, this was so unexpected and gave lasting effects on the city for real-time hours in the game. Another strong point here was the character Victus. The moral debates that you have with him is some of the strongest writing I've seen from Bethesda. From creating an evil to become a hero, a few lives to save the many. He was absolutely insane, but the conversations with him might be the best in Starfield. And the last big quest of the faction, when we go to Londinium where the largest Terramorph outbreak and attack occurred, was phenomenal. There was this build-up for this location, so the stakes felt high going into it. Very few missions in this game felt this way, and most of them came in the factions. We went here to uncover the secrets of the Terramorphs and where they originate from. And well, we definitely uncovered that, and it is such a cool twist. learning that terramorphs came from heat leeches. Those little things on all those ships and planets, they naturally mature into them but can be accelerated by the Lazarus plant. See, I knew I was right to be taking all those things down on all those ships. And we also learn of Vivictus's involvement in the bombing of Londinium to cover up the Lazarus plant and the terramorph's origin, along with coordinating the attacks on Tau Ceti and New Atlantis. The faction ends with us revealing the information we learned, choosing to expose Vivictus and picking how to take out the terramorphs for good, which the latter annoyingly has no lasting effects on the game. The UC Vanguard storyline is strong from start to finish and develops a really interesting mystery behind the terramorphs, and we learn good lore on the wars prior to us and the different groups, which other plotlines lacked. By the time I finished up the UC Vanguard, I started up all the other factions in the game and was well into them. But the next one I completed was the Freestar Rangers. This is by far the weakest group in Starfield. I've been praising the factions, but here it just simply does not amount to much. The Freestar are basically space cowboys, and you investigate this conspiracy surrounding farmland being attacked and a stolen ship. Compared to all the other questlines and their larger scale, I never felt Freestar amounted to those levels. It starts off pretty simple with you initially joining them by helping a hostage situation, and then embarking on a mission to help this lady at a farm who is being threatened. And as the missions went on, I was just sat there waiting for the story to amp up, but then nope, that premise was the entire questline. Compared to the way that the Vanguard develops, this just never did that. We spend all the missions learning about the ship, who ordered the people to attack these farmers and their land. I just never cared in the slightest about these missions or story here. The highlight of this faction was the Red Mile quest. That was really unique. But by the end, we eventually uncover who was behind everything. It was a man named Ron Hope. He was the founder of Hope Tech, so he's a pretty big name. But I didn't like him at all from a previous mission I interacted with him, so I had no qualms about taking him out, which we did. Compared to the other factions, it really falls flat. One of the best aspects of Starfield's different groups is that they're so unique and fully dive into their role. The Vanguard have their own feel with the military, Ryujin is his stealth espionage, the Crimson Fleet are pirates, and it never felt like they fully committed to the Western cowboy feel for Freestar. It could have been so unique, but instead was the most generic and boring faction. No good characters, boring premise, no interesting plot development. It was a big missed opportunity. Following that, the next faction I finished was Ryujin. This is probably the most unique group out of all the ones you can join, as it heavily focuses on stealth. You join this tech mega corporation and climb the ladder doing espionage work, sabotaging companies, and inevitably dealing with betrayal within the company. Things start off fairly laid back as you just go around doing basic stealth work, like stealing data, planting evidence, and messing with different corporations' affairs. Ryujin is always trying to get ahead of their competition. But after a slower start, things pick up once a mole is suspected in the company, and it's our job to find them. We go around learning more about people within our own company, and eventually infiltrate a major competitor in Infinity Ltd. We take them down along with the mole we uncovered. Throughout this faction, I don't think the stealth was necessarily amazing, as again, I never used it until this questline and had to upgrade it once to properly stealth my way through the missions. I did find the neural amp to be a cool feature though, but I forgot to use it in the last mission and gave up on being stealthy and just sprinted through the whole place while getting shot at. As a whole, it was really fun working through the corporate politics with people getting framed of being the mole, than actually uncovering the real one. Learning about different people's motivations, how companies interact. It was a strong point for the faction, and it concludes with us having the choice to acquire Infinity Ltd or not. And also if we should continue to invest in the Neural Amp project, which I decided to discontinue by using the Neural Amp to force them to say no, because this technology is absurdly immoral. The Ryujin faction really offers something unique compared to what the rest of Starfield had in store for you, and having it stay so self-centered with the company itself really enhanced the experience. Then lastly, I saved the Crimson Fleet for last, and it might be my favorite one in the game. It's between this or the UC Vanguard. But here we joined this group of pirates. But we are a double agent and we are working with UC Systef to take the Crimson Fleet out from the inside. Our first true mission being a part of the Crimson Fleet involves learning information and finding clues about the Legacy, which is a massive amount of credits found by Jasper Crix, the man who founded the fleet. We go through amazing missions like the first one, where you and another new member conspire taking out the leader but choose not to. Another mission infiltrating a cruise ship to get credentials, disguising as a pilot and stealing a prototype ship with a device we need. All this slowly building up and trying to find the Legacy. I loved this slow build-up and somewhat doubt if this myth exists or not. And I got so into the Crimson Fleet that it was jarring having to go report to UC Systef. I do wish they played a bigger role than just being that reporting person to relay information to. It would have made the later decision have even more weight to it. But eventually we reach the climax where we uncover the Legacy. This might be my most memorable moment of the whole game. Listening to the audio logs of Jasper while taking in all the credits that we just found is awesome. I don't want to say it felt like Uncharted, but it gave off that energy of having this treasure being hinted at and pursued the whole game, and then actually finding it. And Jasper Crix's audio logs are fantastic, learning why he never made it back and how he ended up dying there. I was really able to sit in the moment there. And then having this epic escape sequence as the ship is exploding after getting the credits, it's so well done. Easily one of the most cinematic things Bethesda has ever done. And then we have the ending where we side with UC Systef or the Crimson Fleet. I sided with Systef because betraying the fleet felt like a better story, and it's why I wish we were closer to Systef, because betraying them would have even more emotional weight. But betraying the fleet was definitely the right pick. Having to go through the key and murder all these people that I've spoken to, traded with, went on missions, it was actually sad. And if we got even more time with them, it would have hit even more so. The final confrontation between Delgado was a great conclusion for the questline, and the Crimson Fleet was so consistently good from start to finish. It's my favorite questline in the entire game. Starfield, for all the hate that it gets, deserves to get credit where it's warranted. The factions offered the best storylines in the entire game, and they all felt unique from one another. I am confident in saying, compared to the guilds from any Elder Scrolls game, the Vanguard and Crimson Fleet are some of the better ones. I think those two are better than all the Skyrim guilds, which I think is a very weak part of that game. I think they're better than some of Oblivion's guilds, but they don't touch the Dark Brotherhood or the Thieves Guild. And they're better in some ways compared to Morrowind's, but the progression in Morrowind's guilds are just so perfect. And talking about progression, people claim that in Starfield, it isn't the greatest or things along those lines, which I disagree with. Yeah, sure, we don't become the leader like we do in the guilds from Elder Scrolls, but I don't think any of the groups warranted that sort of promotion. But maybe there could have been better rewards, and I feel like our decisions didn't have lasting impacts on the world when I feel like they should have. Vanguard's final decision regarding how to deal with the Terramorphs, Freestar with accepting Ron Hope's bribe or taking him out, Ryujin with the buyout of Infinity LTD and use of the Neural Amp, and picking between the fleet or Systef. All big final decisions that don't feel like they matter post its completion. But as a whole, the factions are just fantastic. Again, Starfield has its issues, but they straight up have some of Bethesda's best work and questlines that are vastly better than others in previous titles from them. But as I was going through all the factions, I was also working through the miscellaneous quests, exploring the cities, and hanging out with members of Constellation. Bethesda open worlds are vast and sprawling. You are bound to come across a multitude of side missions throughout that leave a mark on the game and become some of your fondest memories of the title. But Starfield, I don't know, it just didn't have that impact. I think a heavy part of it comes down to the lack of exploration capabilities. One of the most charming aspects of previous Bethesda titles is the capability to roam about and just randomly stumble across a location with a cool questline that you had no plan on doing. Skyrim, I walked into a bar and woke up in a completely new town and got sucked into a whole revolution and uprising within it. Fallout 3 has some of the best side quests in gaming, and most of them I would just randomly uncover. I didn't have those moments in Starfield, and also the quality of the quests themselves aren't the greatest. I really only enjoyed like 3 or 4 of them, with the standout being Operation Starseed, where you interact with all these cloned historical figures and have to side with different ones, in helping them stay or escape the place they live. And there were some other pretty cool ones like Juno's Gambit and its rogue AI, and Mantis, where you explore the hidden base of a space vigilante. But this is definitely a weak point for Starfield when compared to the usual side content Bethesda brings. Every other game has better side missions. For Starfield, I would say 90% of the quests you uncover are overhearing things and then those being added to your activities, and the prompt usually being go speak to this person. I don't mind overhearing being used as a way to get quests, but too many of them revolve around that. It felt like they were just giving me the quest instead of me stumbling upon them. Like, let me speak to the person myself randomly, I don't need to overhear it to then go do it. And this would mainly happen within the cities, which were the main locations I would be throughout the game. Since exploration isn't a focus, I centered my attention on places like New Atlantis, Aquila City, Neon, and Sidonia. The only one I really liked was Neon, since it gave off a cyberpunk vibe. I enjoy how each city feels very different, and they're probably the best cities/settlements we've gotten from Bethesda in terms of design. But if we're talking liveliness, aesthetic, feel, and the quests within, the older games sweep. But Neon again is the best in that aspect from Starfield, and I think it is just a very good city. Back to the quest though, I don't mind doing the miscellaneous ones directly within these places, as it helped build them up a bit more and get you acclimated. Like there was this one little miscellaneous quest line in Neon, where you help a group called the Ebside Strikers. This was really fun and built up Neon that bit more. But such a major way I would come across side quests in other Bethesda games would be roaming about. And since that simply isn't fun here in Starfield or worthwhile doing, that ability to uncover missions is gone. The miscellaneous quests weren't terrible, but I would focus on just doing the best ones as a lot of them just don't amount to much. And as we've been going through this game, probably being 50 to 60 hours in now, from doing the main story, faction, side content, we have had members of Constellation come with us as companions. Bethesda isn't usually known for companions to this degree, with games like Skyrim really only having a few, and also having the goat Serana, Fallout 4 having some characters that you meet along the way like Nick Valentine, but here you have a selection of 4 full characters that have a quest attached to them. Yeah, they're not that good to be honest. Well, Andrea is easily the best, but everyone else is really boring. And even still with Andrea, the way that Starfield chooses to handle these characters and their stories is so weird. Firstly, a terrible decision to just have them all be from Constellation. One of my favorite aspects from games that have a party is the mission to uncover this new party member and experience their unique background and motives and personality. That is not a thing here in Starfield. No fun discovering a new party member. Each one outside of Andrea is very generic and plain. And in terms of their development, you have to keep them in your party for hours upon hours, and you can only bring one at a time. And they just randomly decide to speak to you once their affinity is high enough. They will drop a little info about their past, and it's rinse and repeat until you get their actual quest to finish their story. None of it feels real or genuine or has good build-up. They just randomly want to drop dark secrets about their past. I'm just walking, then Sam wants to talk and says his child wasn't planned? Like, bro, what? Just out of nowhere like that? Nothing for any character has any natural progression. A game like Baldur's Gate 3 handles these moments of your party member wanting to speak with you so much better. Shadowheart's Scar reacts to a wolf, which prompts a conversation. Things within the world cause them to react and say something to you. 90% of the time, Starfield's characters wanted to speak at the worst moments. Like, I would have loved a mission where a moment triggers Sarah's survivor's guilt from the military, and then she wants to speak to us about it. And they're just also uninteresting characters, which doesn't help all that much either. This is another weak spot of the game, and something I wish they fleshed out so much more. But I think it's about that time to look into the main story that we have been slowly making our way through during this game. And well, you didn't miss much with me not bringing it up yet, because damn does it take long for it to actually get anywhere and for it to become good. Which it does, and offers some of the best moments in the game. You just got to go through some of the most boring missions possible to get there that don't advance the plot in the slightest. The first 5 to 6 missions of this main story are focused around collecting the artifacts, the same kind that we found during the opening of the game. We are unaware of their properties, purpose, or where they came from, but in the name of discovery, we want to uncover their secrets. This is a rough start to the narrative. I don't mind the goal of these missions to be basic or simple. It can work to ease you into the story and really amp it up as time goes. So many of my favorite stories in gaming are slow burns. But here, nothing is burning at all. It feels like straight up fetch quests early on. You collect an artifact and usually work with a member of Constellation to introduce them to the game. No new information is gained, you just go to some basic location, kill some enemies, and collect the artifact. There's also a mission where you gain powers, but getting those are even more repetitive. Even if they were basic missions, at least make the levels enjoyable and unique. It felt like I was completing a random miscellaneous mission just to go fetch this item for a character, and they send you to some generic cave. These types of missions take up a heavy portion of the main story, which is such an unfortunate situation. But if you do pace things out properly and just kind of leave the first few main missions in the background, it doesn't feel as terrible. But I don't think that's an excuse whatsoever to just make outright boring and repetitive missions, especially when it's for the main story. But there were some standouts though, as the quest All That Money Can Buy with Walter Shroud is a good one in the game. With Neon being a great setting, there being depth with gameplay mechanics needed, some moral choices, and of course the conclusion where we run into the Starborn for the first time, with them threatening us to stop searching for these artifacts. This is our first sense of progress in the main story, and it was very much needed. Now we're curious about the Starborn. Who are they? What do they want with the artifacts? And it adds a new layer of mystery to the plot. And from there, we gotta collect more artifacts. Yay! I'm just blown away by the fact that they actually have randomly generated portions for this main story. It makes collecting artifacts, which are already boring, 10 times more tedious. Okay, it's not randomly generated, but some of the artifacts are on random planets. But there is one decent one in this next batch called No Sudden Moves. It was still just stealing an artifact, but this time we're on a cool ship with a captain that's a collector, so the interior stands out and there's good stuff to steal. Maybe my standards were dropped so much from these terrible missions, but something so simple makes it infinitely more bearable. But at this point, after retrieving our next batch of artifacts, we're maybe halfway or a bit more done with the main story, and nothing has happened unfortunately. It's my biggest issue in the main story. It's just outright not fun up to this point. Besides 2 missions, I have disliked them all. I don't know why Bethesda insisted on backloading this game so much. You need something to hook the player, not just reward people that played the entire thing. But we are at a major turning point in the narrative and where the main story really starts to pick itself up. We have been suffering thus far with this plot, but we finally reached the good stuff. It's some of the best parts of the whole game. Since our last interaction with the Starborn, we have not seen them much. But now we get information that a Starborn named the Hunter has attacked the Eye and is making his way to attack the lodge. Here we must decide if we want to stay and protect the lodge or to go help the people who were just attacked at the Eye. And depending on where you choose to go, one of the members of Constellation will die. And this is determined based on your affinity with those characters. So the top 2 members that you are closest with at that point will be the 2 potential deaths. I decided to go to the Eye and I saved Andreja in the process. And I came back to the lodge to see that Sarah had died. From there we must escape with Noelle and make it to our ship while running from the Hunter. This quest was awesome, such a highlight of Starfield as a whole. Having the mechanic where potential deaths are based on your affinity with characters is such a cool idea. I was actually shook when Sarah died. I wasn't expecting Bethesda to do something like that. And this builds up tension even more so between the Starborn now, as they have just murdered one of our members. And speaking about the Hunter, you can actually meet him at the very start of the game, which I did. In one of the bars at New Atlantis, you can see and speak to him, and he says we will meet again, which is a really fun touch. The only downside to this mission isn't even the mission's fault, but I just didn't care for Sarah whatsoever, so I wasn't really sad that she died, but I was definitely shocked. I've never seen Bethesda make a move like this in one of their games, and it was awesome to experience. But from there, the game slows down a bit, but not in a bad way. This is where we finally start getting some answers and lore expanded on. We explore the idea of unity, as we travel to different locations, finding notes, talking to different people, etc. This eventually leads us into a mission where we board the ship that the Starborn are on, and we finally get to meet them. We meet the Hunter and the Emissary. The Emissary ends up being the person who died in the high price to pay quest. So I see Sarah's face, but it's not the same Sarah. It's a Sarah from a different universe where I was the one who died. And we see the Hunter's face, and it looks like Keeper Achilles, who was the one we were just working with in the last mission. At this point, we have learned the purpose of unity, that it is an ability for a person to become a Starborn, to leave their current body behind. Your memories, consciousness is spread through the multiverse in all realities, living lives in all these new timelines. You must collect all the artifacts to be able to reach unity. The Hunter believes it should be available to all strong enough to reach it, and the Emissary believes that it should only be accessed and used by the Chosen. At a later point, we have to pick who to side with. But after our interaction and meeting with the Starborn, we embark on our last few missions of the game. The 2 standout missions in the build-up to the ending are Unearthed and Entangled. Starting with Unearthed, this gave us some of the lore and backstory on Earth and how it became uninhabitable. This all connects with the first ever grav jump drive and how the person who made it, Victor Isa, interacted with a Starborn version of himself. He knew that the grav drive would ruin Earth's atmosphere, but he went along with it anyway. This is just an amazing reveal, and exploring these NASA ruins on Earth adds such an awesome element to the whole thing. It's one of the best reveals in the game. Bethesda is typically amazing with environmental world building and creating lore. It's one of the reasons I love Fallout and Elder Scrolls so much. And this was a prime example of them at their best in that regard. It was always a thought in the back of my mind wondering what happened to Earth, and they connected so well to the plot of the game. And then from there, Entangled produced one of the best missions in Starfield. At its core, it's still centered around collecting an artifact, but the means in which we do so are so amazing. It annoys me that we didn't get more missions like this. It starts off with us getting this distress call at this research station. There was an incident with the artifact there, which caused 2 parallel universes to overlap, and we must travel through both of them to complete the mission and try to save both timelines. I was so shook when the timeline shifted for the first time, because the game kind of trained you to not expect much from collecting artifacts, but this just offers the best level design in all of Starfield. Compared to the straight up randomly generated locations for artifacts, this sweeps the floor with them. It is so cool jumping back and forth between the 2 timelines, with one being the station all normal, and the other with it being completely destroyed. It reminds me of that one sequence in Titanfall 2. I think those sorts of levels are so well crafted and stand out in games. But following those missions, we are left with the conclusion of this main story. We seek to enter Unity, but I chose to go against the Hunter and the Emissary, so I must defeat them first. The fight against them is a pretty cool one, but I didn't feel much as I didn't care about either character at all. But the fight was intense, facing up against cloned versions of you and your companion, jumping through different locations and fighting. It was really fun. But as cool as the sequence was, there is a level of flatness involved in this ending portion. I struggled to have any motivation myself to go to Unity. I didn't see the charm in existing in all timelines and leaving the one I was in. How I spent all this time here building a life for myself, and now I just have to leave that in the name of discovery? From my understanding, you are just living in endless loops, recollecting the artifacts to do it all over again. I'm not talking gameplay wise, but narratively, that's what's in store for you. Every Starborn we've seen is seemingly addicted to this pursuit of the artifacts, and I feel like we don't explore that thought enough in the story. I had a brief convo with Andreja about my doubts, which I liked, but I wanted more. The game was just kind of saying, this is what you have to do. I think the concept of the Starborn and Unity is a good one, but I think they were missing the why behind it all. I couldn't care about the Hunter or the Emissary and their motivations. I feel like our motivations as the player were weak. There's so much deeper conversations I think we could have had surrounding this. Every character is acting like this is some awesome thing. No, it's not. Like, why do we have the motivation to kill these Starborn for it? Nothing bad happens to us if we don't. They were stakes that aren't even real. Oh no, they win and take the artifacts. We just keep living our lives. Unless they choose to take us out, but again, we put ourselves in that situation for no reason. But once we defeat the Hunter and Emissary and collect their artifacts, we make our way to Unity, where we have the capability and opportunity to enter and become a Starborn. During this, we interact with another version of ourselves as we view all the events that will occur in this universe because of the actions we committed throughout, which was awesome to see. You are then given the choice to enter or not. Oh, they were so close to getting right. If you choose to ignore Unity and not enter it, the game just continues and doesn't give a definitive ending, which I wish it did. I feel like the idea of making this discovery and realizing the horrifying implications of doing so, and then deciding you want to stay in the universe you've spent 70 plus hours in, instead of basically sacrificing your life to permanently chase down artifacts, the game doesn't entertain the thought of choosing not to enough. It would be nice to get a credit roll on something like that, instead of the game just continuing. Because the whole purpose and drive of Constellation is discovery of the unknown, and it would have been cool that we choose to reject that, and turn to stay with something familiar, that we have built up throughout these hours. But once you choose to enter and become a Starborn, you are sent to a new universe at the very start of the game, having your own ship and being a Starborn. This is the New Game Plus, and it is easily the most unique take that I've seen on it. That each New Game Plus you do, there are small changes that make each run unique, which is simply awesome, but something I'll never experience because I don't want to do New Game Plus. For people that want to though, this is sick. And that concludes the main story of Starfield. The ending itself is conceptually very cool. I just deeply believe there was more decision possibility for us as the player. I didn't feel like we had enough agency, and the only actual ending is becoming a Starborn. It's not the conclusion I would have chosen, but was forced to do so. Disregarding that though, the game really amps itself up at the end. You just gotta go through the mud first to get there. And ultimately, that is the story of Starfield as a whole. The game is the farthest thing from being perfect. It is quite the opposite. There are so many decisions and game choices throughout that confuse me on why they were even done. But underneath all of that, there are genuinely some amazing aspects here, and some of the best work Bethesda has ever put out. People have hated this game and will continue to do so, and I can see where a lot of the frustrations come from. This is a frustrating game on many levels. But I think it eventually gets to a point and people act like this is the worst game ever and that it's a disgrace to gaming. I couldn't disagree more. I liked Starfield, and I'm surprised I'm saying that. I have many issues with it, but there is more than enough here that is good content that is worth your time. This game has made me have so many opinions on it, but in the end, it is a title I had fun playing, and it was worth the 70-ish hours that I put into it. Starfield proved me wrong.